nowadays you got to have that because people nowadays.
Before we get straight into the podcast, I just want to give a huge shout out to our sponsors, Declan Kirby GAA Star. Declan Kirby GAA Star Championship Journey. It's a series of GAA team children's books written by primary school teacher and GAA coach Michael Egan. You can check it out in the link in the description down below, of course, as well. Follow the trials and tribulations of Declan Kirby and his team at Smithgreen Gaelic Football Club, recently formed but promising GAA team. The book is now available in Easons and all good bookshops, so check it out in the description down below, and let's get straight into it. Welcome back to GAA Fan TV. My name is Aaron. I'm delighted to be joined here once again by Matthew Hurley from the GAA Statsman Podcast to review all the weekend in the All-Ireland Senior Hurling Championship and the All-Ireland Senior Football Championship as well. I suppose we're coming down to the final four in both football and hurling. There's only 6 games actually left now across both championships, which sounds kind of crazy really, considering we've had so many games happening over the past couple of weeks. I suppose it's before we know it, it'll all be over.
It will, yeah. It's a crazy time. The All Ireland, it's coming down to the bitter end now, and it's going to be competitive in both. I feel like Limerick have had a 3-week gap. We'll talk about Limerick later on, and Dublin, I don't know, are they at their best now this year? I suppose Kerry fans will be licking their lips seeing it All Ireland to distance, but don't right over Mayo, Tyrone either. They might pull a surprise given Tyrone's talent and Mayo's youth. So both championships should be very, very interesting. I'm definitely looking forward to the next few weeks.
Yeah, 100%. And I suppose we'll start with the football action. And I suppose we know the final four now. Obviously, it's Mayo, Tyrone, Kerry, and Dublin. Obviously, Dublin playing Mayo, Kerry playing Tyrone. I think that was the final four that probably most people would have expected at the start of the year. I think Ulster was the only one that was up in the air. Maybe it was going to be Donegal or Monaghan or Armagh were kind of in the question as well. But generally speaking, different to last year where we had 2 shocks and Cavan and Tipperary coming through, and even Mayo to a certain extent. I think a lot of people had Galway before a ball was kicked, just after the lockdown. So I suppose this year the final four very much is expected. No shocks this time.
No shocks this time, no. It's kind of disappointing in a way. Like the only championship that was actually competitive in many ways was the Ulster Championship, and when he would agree with that. Look, in Munster, Cork were very, very poor against Kerry. We lay down to the challenge. It was shambolic at times, and we just had no answer to it. Galway, in fairness, put it up to Mayo in the first half, but Mayo just pulled through, and disappointed with Roscommon's performance. And then you look at Leitrim and Sligo, they're at the level where they're at, unfortunately, and Mayo just breezed past them. And Leinster, we'll talk about Kildare, Dublin, I suppose, later on, but I was kind of disappointed with Kildare. I thought they'd push up more in Dublin, they'd attack more, but they didn't. They lay off Dublin. Dublin just passed the ball back to front. Meath actually did more attacking in the second half against Dublin and were unlucky to come out with a big enough loss with 6 points. So, look, kind of disappointed with Kildare. Meath acquitted themselves well. Westmeath acquitted themselves well, but still same old. And I don't know, does this beg the question, should we have a Champions League format? Like, I've had so many suggestions of that on my podcast, one of them being Robbie Kiley. James Dolan from Westmeath also suggested that. So it's an interesting topic, and it should be discussed at Congress. I'd be for a Champions League format where you have Division 1 sides Part 1 and Division 2 sides Part 2. It'd probably make the championship more interesting. But then again, it takes the rivalry out of provincial, so you can't win either way in many ways. So it should be a very interesting topic going down to Congress in November. But as I said, Final Four as expected, really.
Yeah. And when I spoke with Owen Cleary, actually, he gave the same suggestion as well. Like, so it definitely does seem to be a popular suggestion across the board. I'm not too sure if that's one of the suggestions that's been discussed at Congress, but definitely it should be something anyway. Maybe they should look into, or even trial for a year. I mean, this year or last year were probably the years that they probably could have trialed it, with the fact that we had such limited games. But I suppose we'll have to wait and see what they do. Tyrone and Monaghan, that was obviously one of the games at the weekend, and I suppose it was the one game in football out of the 2 that was very competitive. Certainly went down to the wire, close battle, but Tyrone just about having enough in the end. Like Monaghan, it looked like they were gonna, pull it back in the final few minutes, but Tyrone just about getting over the line.
Just about go over the line, and I suppose that's what good teams do. They get over the line when they aren't playing particularly at their very, very best. And I suppose the first half won it for them. Like, it was a big gap for Monaghan to come back from. And in fairness to them, they did pull back the second half. But like, Monaghan, they just can't beat Tyrone and Croke Park, no matter how well they play. But even the Sunday game analysts were saying it, they were kind of correct. Monaghan, they just didn't perform to their very, very best. And look, Tyrone did enough to get through Tyrone's talents. Like, you have the likes of Cathal McShane coming off the bench to try and finish Monaghan off. Like, that's kind of scary when you think about it. And not people are writing Tyrone on as all Ireland favourites at all. And when you look at the talent they have, that is incredible in many ways. So, look, Monaghan, they lick their wounds, they go back there. It was a successful season for Monaghan in fairness. They stayed up in Division 1 when probably most people didn't expect them to. They got to the Ulster final, beating Armagh. So, look, they'll take that positive. They'll go into next year. They've some very good young talent coming through, as seen with the under-20s. Our Mulligan was under-20 and he came into the senior panel this year. So, look, there's positive signs for Monaghan, but Tyrone, they can be a threat if they play to their full potential against Kerry, but we'll have to see, But if them players are at their full potential, if Cathal McShane, Conor McKenna, Darren McCurry, who he wasn't at his very best on Saturday, he was at his best in the previous two. If he gets them performances to the previous two level, Kerry could have their hands full. So it should be an interesting battle with Kerry. Like, you see, they still have defensive issues after the first quarter against Cork. So Tyrone will look to exploit that. And long live Tyrone going into the championship. And as I said, Monaghan will go with some dignity this time rather than the last few years.
Yeah, I suppose for Tyrone, it'll just be about kind of executing a game plan that works. Like, and if they were to run at Kerry, and really go at them, especially with the forwards that they have, even with Matty Donnelly as well, you could see them, causing one or two problems for that Kerry side that probably realistically haven't really, other than the first quarter against Cork and in patches against Clare and Tip, like they've never really been tested at all there at the back. And I suppose, like what you said about Monaghan, it's a hard one to kind of put your finger on it because, like, in the first half, they looked like a little like nervous in some ways, which you wouldn't normally associate with this Monaghan team. Like, they are a very experienced team. They've won two. There's a lot of players in there like Conor McManus and Darren Hughes and Kieran Hughes that have all, won two Ulster titles that have been there for Monaghan over the past 6 to 7 years. So, like, it was a hard one to kind of put your finger on it as to why they were kind of a bit lackluster in that first half, because even though they had their disappointing patches against Armagh, like and at different stages in the league, it seemed to be more closing out games rather than starting games. So it kind of was a hard one to put your finger on it.
It absolutely was, yeah. When you put it that way, when they were performing well at the start of games, they came out of the traps pretty quickly. And look, they actually pulled it back. In fairness to them, they showed resolve, which they probably didn't over most of the second half against Armagh. They showed that resolve against Tyrone. But yeah, it is a hard one. I suppose another thing is the Croke Park factor. Like, the last few meetings against Tyrone in Croke Park, they've struggled badly. No matter about the controversial decisions with Sean Kavanagh or Tiernan McCann, they've always seemed to lose them games in Croke Park when it gets down to the nitty-gritty. And maybe that's a factor for Monaghan. Like, I think even going away from Tyrone, I think Monaghan have only won one game out of a few in Croke Park. It's a terrible record for them. So it's something that needs to be sorted if they want to challenge for honours in the future. So look, it is a hard one to put your finger on it, definitely. And look, as I said, it is a positive for Monaghan this year. They stayed up in Division 1. They performed well. They acquitted themselves well. They got to an Ulster final. They've got the Ulster underdogs beating them tag. That's gone now after that win over Fermanagh. Well, we hope it's gone now for their sake. So, look, it's a positive for Monaghan, but as you say rightly, that Ulster final, it's hard to put your finger on what happens in that first half, and ultimately it lost them the game.
Yeah, like what you said there, like kind of in the second half, they definitely did fight and battle, and we even seen like it was almost like the battle of the two goalkeepers in many ways. Like, you'd Rory Beggan getting forward, almost playing as a midfielder at different stages, and then Noel Morgan decided to get involved as well. Like, it's it definitely is a new evolution of goalkeepers in many ways doing this, because even the likes of Stephen Cluxton, like, you'd never see him do anything like this. So it is quite interesting when you do see Monaghan and Tyrone and even Laois at different times with Niall Corba. I've seen them do it a couple of times. Like, it's very risky and like it can backfire, but I suppose when you're chasing a game, like, it needs to be done. And Rory Beggan at different stages, like, I mean, getting that block in at one stage, like in the final 10 minutes, he was catching high balls. I mean, you kind of just wonder, maybe he should just get an outfield jersey, stick a number 8 on him and just go on midfield and put someone else in goal, because he was nearly doing more work than the midfielders at times.
Absolutely, yeah. And you say it is kind of risky, but I suppose you could do them risks if you could cover back afterwards. You see Rory Beggan's tackle in the last 2 minutes. That was an absolutely unbelievable tackle, and it epitomises what a great goalkeeper is. And Niall Morgan, the same, just playing in and around the lines. Like, Niall Morgan has done this in the league down through the years multiple times. He comes up when they need him, kicks the ball from beyond the 45 over the bar to level the game. Like, it is risky. Tyrone just robbed the ball, but as I say, you can take them risks if you're willing to cover back afterwards. And Rory Beggan definitely did that. And the speed might have been an issue in my head going into this game about the two goalkeepers, but Rory Beggan put them issues to sleep then. His speed is something else, just getting that ball, the determination. And yeah, obviously they are risky goalkeepers. And look, it's the modern game. I suppose Cluxton didn't do it as often. He did it sometimes, I would say, around 2012, 2013. As he got older, he got more conservative. I suppose Mayo and Kerry don't do that. I suppose they're a bit more old-fashioned than Tyrone and Monaghan. I suppose another goalkeeper that does it, Sean Patton for Donegal, does it at times, because he's kind of used to playing soccer in the early part of his career. So, look, it's the modern game. I don't know, is it the goalkeeper the likes of Kerry or Mayo wants? They want just someone that could stop the ball, kick out the ball. Cork the same, Galway more or less the same as well. But with the Ulster goalkeepers, long may continue, because I suppose for a fan, it's kind of frustrating if the goalkeeper makes a humongous error and it leads to a goal after them going out the field. But for the neutral, it's absolutely entertaining and it's brilliant. Like, usually it's 14 on 14. With these, it's 15 on 15. Brilliant players playing against each other, and long may continue, because it's absolutely really entertaining for the neutral, definitely.
Yeah, it is an interesting watch, all right. And like, speaking of Niall Morgan, like, it will be interesting to see kind of what his approach going into the Kerry game, because obviously we've seen him get caught out when Gavin White was able to lob him from about 40 to 50 yards. An incredible goal that day. So, like, I mean, obviously it is Kerry next for Tyrone, and it will be an interesting game, and it will be interesting to see Tyrone's game plan as well, because like, that's something for Niall Morgan that could easily linger in his head, maybe going into that game. Maybe he's a little more conservative, and in doing so, maybe he actually hampers his own team. Like, it's going to be an interesting approach for Tyrone.
It is, yeah. And you look at Kerry's firepower, they will hammer you about 22 points, 25 points if they want to. That's no doubt about that there. And even, like, the amazing thing about Kerry as well, David Clifford wasn't performing last Sunday, and still, when you look at the other players around them, Sean O'Shea, Paul Gainey, you have Darragh Moynihan coming back into the team. Paddy Clifford is my player of the year so far. So that talent in that Kerry team, Tyrone can't afford to make mistakes in the back line. Like Niall Morgan coming out of the goal, as much as he wants to, as much as it's good for the neutral, as much as he wants to head the team out, he can't make those same mistakes like he did in the league. Like, that's just schoolboy, and it's playing into Kerry's hands. And Tyrone defenders, like the likes of Michael McKernan, Peter Harter, Ciara McGeary back there, maybe they'll put an extra marker, extra sweeper, put someone extra maybe on Paddy Clifford, who's contributing to games. It should be very interesting to see what approach Tyrone go down. But look at Kerry's forward line throughout the championship and throughout the league. Tyrone, they cannot make mistakes with this forward line lurking about. And Clifford, I think, will be chomping at the bit. Like, he hasn't really performed his level best in the championship as of yet, even though he's scored 2-9, only 2-9 so far. So it should be very, very interesting. I think Clifford will put up a big performance. Paddy Clifford might be double marked. You see maybe Kieran McGeary or Peter Hart, or maybe even put Conor Myler, who's kind of used to that kind of a game, back there as well. So I don't know, will Tyrone put 15 men behind the ball or just go at Kerry? This should be very interesting to see what develops. But I'd honestly expect a Kerry win, but I would be surprised if Tyrone roll them over in many ways with the players they have. But they have to be honest from the get-go to win the game.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely will be an interesting approach, all right, for Tyrone, because you would feel like maybe they need a bit of dark arts kind of from the Mickey Hart era or something, maybe just to drag Kerry down to their own level and slow the game down, and maybe even find a bit of balance between, you know, defense and attack and breaking with pace and whatnot. But like, I know it was only the first quarter of the Cork Kerry game, but Cork, even at one stage, like, because Kerry were getting their cornerback so far forward and their wing backs were pushing up, they were leaving a lot of space in behind, and that was where the Cork goal came from. So like, obviously, you know, Cork's heads kind of went as soon as Kerry got more and more into the game. But if Tyrone can keep their composure and have a similar kind of strategy going into that game, and maybe if you have Matty Donnelly and Darren McCurry, you know, racing forward, I mean, maybe Kerry wanted to leave them men loose because they didn't feel like they were going to cause enough problems. Maybe that Kerry will have a different approach for Tyrone, but I mean, it is going to be an extremely fascinating one if they have a similar approach there.
It is, yeah, and just in the Cork game, I speak about it so many times as a Cork fan, but our players just lay down. I don't think Tyrone players will lie down whatsoever. Like in the like the errors for goals. I thought Tyrone were sloppy enough in the league. I don't think they'll be sloppy enough again. Having watched the Cork game, the first two goals in particular from a Cork point of view, from a defensive point of view, were terrible to concede. You look at the first goal, Brian O'Bughley running through. Yes, it was a brilliant taking goal from a cornerback, but I'd be questioning why isn't one or two Cork defenders going to the danger when he's coming through on goal, and it was an easy finish in the end. And then the second goal, when Sean Powter and Cian Kiley were pushing up the field, and it was 5 forwards and 4 defenders. Like, Tyrone surely will not make them same mistakes again. And look, it was kamikaze stuff from Cork, but I think Tyrone are more established. They're a Division 1 side. They know what to expect from Kerry at this stage, surely after their league meeting early on in the year. So if Tyrone cut out them sloppy errors in defence and do the basics right, they could catch Kerry. But having looked at Kerry throughout the league and the championship, the way they're racking up scores, it doesn't seem their defenders matter. Their defensive issues matter anymore because their forwards up the other end are just firing on all cylinders. So it's actually going to be very interesting what happens. But the main thing for Tyrone is to cut out the sloppy errors of defence. If they can do that, they have a great chance. But if they don't, it won't be similar to Cork, because I don't believe Kerry would beat Tyrone by 22 points. But I think it'll be something like 10 points or over if Tyrone make the same sloppy errors as they did in the league. But hopefully they won't. Hopefully it'll be a good game to watch. And hopefully, from my point of view, there'll be a shock on and Tyrone win it. But I think Kerry will just have enough to beat them, even if Tyrone cut out them sloppy errors.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and I think as well, because in the Tyrone Kerry game, I remember it was on early on a Sunday, and I think Tyrone had to travel all the way up to Killarney, and they stayed 2 nights before or something like that. And it was a game that essentially didn't mean anything, because even if Tyrone won the game, you know, you were kind of relying on a Dublin win or a Donegal win in the other game for there to be a league final. It was essentially almost like a challenge game in many ways. There was really nothing on the line. So this will definitely be different. Like, Tyrone will definitely have a different approach going into this. But like what you said, like, from here, it's very hard to go against Kerry at this moment in time. Anyways, I suppose Dublin were the other side who booked themselves into an All-Ireland semi-final. No real surprises. It was Dublin 20 points, Kildare 1-9. Routine enough from Dublin in the end. I mean, not brilliant from Dublin, but better than the Meath and Wexford game anyways.
Was better in many ways than definitely the Wexford game, and not so much the Meath game. Like, in the first half, they were absolutely brilliant. They blitzed Meath, and that was the winning of the game in the end. But this game was kind of slow, it was ponderous, and Kildare, as I said before, I was kind of disappointed with Kildare. The way they didn't push up in the Dublin kickouts, they didn't go for them with the forwards they have. Well, I suppose other than Jimmy Hyland and Daniel Flynn, they weren't hitting the target whatsoever, Kildare, and that will frustrate Jack O'Connor going into next year. they need the forwards. If you're going to face Dublin and try and win the game, you have to hit the target most times. I actually wasn't doing stats in the game, but I'd be very interested to see Kildare's accuracy with their shooting. I think it was way above 10 wides. It was absolutely ridiculous. And if Kildare do that again next year, they're not going to beat Dublin. Simple as that. If that's their aim, look, they have to hit the target most times against Dublin. You even see with Meath a few times, like the time they hit 1-4 in 2019, they hit a load of wides that game. So you have to be very accurate against Dublin. At least get over 60% on your accuracy. If you don't do that, you're not going to beat Dublin. Simple as that. On to Dublin. I don't know, is this kind of a tactical plan? They kind of struggled through the Leinster Championship, and then against Mayo, bam, they're back in this. But no, it'll be actually a very interesting one to see how Dublin play against Mayo. But judging by the last 3 games, I think this Dublin team is on the decline. You look at the players coming on even. I know, don't get me wrong, they're decent players and deserve their call-up for Dublin, but I don't think they're as good as the likes of Dermot Connolly coming on or Kevin McMenamin in the past. And that's kind of a worry going to the game for Desi Farrell. And it's actually weird because I think Mayo might have a stronger bench than Dublin. That's kind of the weird thing. You still have Mark Moran, who's in the wilderness. You have to take into account him. He might be on the panel even. So, look, it'll be very interesting to see what happens. And look, Dublin's dominance might be at an end and people will breathe a sigh of relief. Obviously, you won't, Aaron, as a Dublin fan yourself, but it might be a Mayo win. But as I said, disappointed with Kildare, but Dublin, there's still a lot to work on. And don't be surprised if Mayo pull off a huge shock in the semi-final.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of people talking about at the moment the possibility of Mayo doing so, and like what you said, even James Carr as well coming off the bench, like kind of making an impact for Mayo. It does seem that Mayo have a better bench. Even Tyrone probably have a better bench at this stage as well, which is just something you wouldn't have associated with Dublin down the years. And like what you're saying, going back to this game, like I think RTE said, I think at one stage that Kildare had 36% accuracy in the first half in terms of shooting. I don't know what the second half was, but I think they were even worse in the second half. So I'd imagine it was in and around that range anyway for the entirety of the game. Like I think maybe with this young Kildare team, with some of the new players that have obviously come into the side, obviously Daniel Flynn's come back in since being in Australia, but Jimmy Hyland's a new player and actually played quite well, to be fair to him. But like I suppose because with Meath, they've had a couple of cracks of Dublin down the years, and you could see even in the second half of the game that they'd maybe learned from a few of those mistakes, and because they're so used to playing Dublin, whereas this Kildare team, it was the first time they really played Dublin in a big pressure game. Like they played Dublin 2 years ago in a Leinster semi-final, different team, wasn't Jack O'Connor's team, so it was completely different. So I suppose like for Kildare, maybe playing in Division 1 next year, playing these high quality games and playing these high quality teams, maybe then they might start, kind of getting up to that level. But yeah, like you would be a bit worried having watched them in that game because it was extremely poor.
It was, particularly their effort was definitely up there. I think their effort in hassling Dublin at times was decent enough, but the two things that stood out, they didn't push up at the kickouts and their accuracy was absolutely awful. And you need those to be a top notch to beat Dublin. And as I said, definitely Division 1 football, it'll definitely improve them. You look at Division 2, no disrespect to Cork and Clare, but that's not the aim Kildare are aiming for. They're aiming to try and beat Dublin. As unrealistic as it may seem, that's their aim. They haven't won a Leinster Championship since 2000 when Mick O'Dwyer was in charge. And even speaking to Johnny Doyle at my podcast, it's kind of frustrating for Kildare at this stage, not winning a Leinster title since 2000, despite being in All Ireland semi-final since then. So that's their aim. They want to win the Leinster Championship. And to do that, they have to play top level football in Division 1. Can they stay up is another story. Like Monaghan have improved. Armagh have definitely improved this year. They've cut out the errors in years gone by, like against Donegal last year. So it will be very, very hard for Kildare to stay up in Division 1 next year. But getting that exposure, a bit like Meath in many ways last year, getting that exposure, getting them game time, facing them top quality opposition, and getting to within within 5 points. That'll be probably the aim for Jack O'Connor and Kildare. But even, he's a former Kerry manager, he's a former All-Ireland champion. I know Jack O'Connor would want the best he can possibly get out of this Kildare team. And that'll probably be a Leinster Championship and staying up in Division 1. Is it realistic next year? No, simply not. I think Dublin still have another year in the tank to get another Leinster Championship into their illustrious history. But staying up at Division 1, if they play to their full potential and cut out the sloppy errors against the top opposition, who knows? They could even stay up. It's a decent year for them. They have to build on this now. I don't think Meath built on it as much as Kildare this year in particular. I thought they were poured off of the league. And now they're Division 2. So, look, Kildare have to build on this. They have to stay up at Division 1. They have to improve the sloppy errors for shooting and ultimately put up a challenge to a Kerry, a Dublin, a Mayo, and see where it gets them. So, but I'd be very confident if I was a Kildare fan. You're in the hands of Jack O'Connor, an All-Ireland champion. You have decent young players coming through. Obviously, they're under 20 champions in 2018. People may forget it, but they were. So it's a good time to be a Kildare fan. And Jack O'Connor, has he well settled going to Division 1 next year?
Yeah, absolutely. Like what you said there, you like under 20 champions back in 2018, like certainly a lot of good players coming through. And you do wonder maybe as well, like, is there just because of you're playing Dublin and Croke Park in a Leinster final, like it's the third year in a row where a team is, dropped a number of chances short into the goalkeeper's hands, dropped chances wide, chances they'd normally score. Like you do wonder sometimes with this Leinster Championship and with the fact that you're playing Dublin, like it's such a, like I'd imagine it's mentally draining in many ways because like, in your head, you need to be scoring probably 70 to 80% of the chances that you're going to get. And the fact that, you spend so much time trying to win the ball back because Dublin are passing it from side to side for 15 to 20 minutes. And then you win the ball back, you go up the other end, you get nothing from it. Like I'd say that's probably just mentally draining for a lot of these Leinster teams as well, who probably don't have the quality going forward, but like when you're spending so much time chasing the ball, like it probably does just completely take it out of you.
It's a good point, actually. Yeah. And even see Meath did this. Well, they didn't do it last year. They didn't get the chances last year in 2020. 2019, they were well on top of Dublin in the first 20 minutes and still kicked those wides after robbing Dublin of possession. That'll be the frustrating team. But obviously, seeing Dublin with that much possession, it will drain you in many ways going up the field. So maybe that is a factor going up the field. That's actually a very good point. But Kildare, that's another thing Kildare need to improve. Their concentration. When they win the ball back, they have to go up the other end, get it to the right players in the right positions and pop the ball over. Because if you win the ball back and just kick it for the sake of it, what's the point then? You're just going to get nothing out of it. And all that defensive work is undone. So I would say get it to Daniel Flynn, get it to Jimmy Hyland in the first few minutes and see where it gets you. Maybe if you're more confident going to the last few minutes, pass it to them. You see Brian McLaughlin coming off the bench. I think he was a wing back, correct me if I'm wrong, no, but he kicked a point towards the end because there was no pressure on him. And that would be the same if there's confidence driven into these Kildare players going into the last few minutes and you're close to the game. So I think the main thing for Kildare is probably eradicating them shooting errors and getting the confidence up, which would probably mean passing it to Daniel Flynn, passing it to Jimmy Hylands and putting it over the bar. And then in the next few minutes, get someone else on it like Dereck Kirwan and keep building up them scores. That's the main thing. So that's actually a very good point. It does drain a lot out of these Leinster teams, but as you see with Dublin's bench, maybe it's coming towards an end now, and hopefully these Leinster teams can develop because we need a good Leinster championship. There's the most teams in it, and some of them like Wexford are underachieving. Meath and Kildare to a certain extent are underachieving. Westmeath are coming up the ranks. So there are some teams there, but the issue is, will they execute the shooting properly once they come up against the big beast that's Dublin? And I think they can over the next few years. Look at Dublin's bench. It's kind of slowing down the development line there. So we'll have to see, but it'd be a task for the Leinster teams to follow in the next few years.
Yeah, like, and even when Daniel Flynn scored that goal as well, like, it was down to 4 points, and you're even thinking maybe could Kildare do something similar to Meath? Like, if they get, 1 or 2 quick points, all of a sudden it's 2 points, and as poor as Kildare have played, then all of a sudden maybe they're actually in the game, and that probably shows that Dublin just haven't been at the races this year. And obviously you were saying earlier they might just turn it on against Mayo, but like, when you look at Dublin down the years, normally they breeze through these Leinster games. They turn it on in these Leinster games. It's actually probably what's one of the more impressive things about Dublin down the years is that they're expected to beat a team by 20 points, and then they actually go out and do it. Like, there's not many teams. All right, Kerry are doing that this year, but in previous years, even the great Kerry teams back in 2009, 2010, like, they often used to scrape through those Munster Championship games. And I even remember Kerry nearly getting beat by Sligo one year in a qualifier game. So it is interesting with Dublin. And I remember there was a comment coming in the live match reaction before my internet cut out. I think it was from On Far. Actually, he's a regular subscriber and commenter on the channel, and he was saying how maybe it's the end of an era for this Dublin team. And like, as Dublin fans, we've been so used to so much success. It's been so good. It's been so easy. But, I don't know, like, it kind of does feel like it might be coming to the end of an era a little bit, even with Dean Rock, like, getting substituted early, not really playing as many games. Like, he does have a few more years left in him, but he is getting older, and you do wonder, is Desi trying to change too many things too quickly? But certainly for Dublin, a lot to work on going into the Mayo game.
There is definitely a lot to work on, and as I say, with Dean Rock, I don't know, would he be useful from play anymore? That's the issue with Dean Rock. I think Cormac Costello has clocked up a very good scoring rate this season, so that's probably a positive for you, and he's very good free taker as well. So yeah, but the development line doesn't seem to be there, despite them reaching 220 finals in a row. Like, you question Kieran Archer. I don't know why he isn't on the senior panel, for example. Lee Gannon's another one who I thought would have been a Jack McCaffrey replacement, an ideal player to run up the field. So, and Peadar O'Cofaigh Byrne isn't playing as much games as he would like either. So, look, looking at the under-20 talent coming through in Dublin over the last few years, there seems to be talent there, but you look at the bench still, it's not this, other than the Baskels who will come on and try and make a difference. There's not much in that Dublin bench that will frighten the likes of Kerry and Tyrone and Mayo. That's the most worrying aspect for Dublin. So going into the semi-final, they might turn it on against Mayo, but it's going into the game. It's a strange one because I think Mayo probably have the stronger bench, and you wouldn't have said that over the last few seasons. And even I think Kieran Whelan was on the Sunday game highlight show last night. He was saying that going into the last few minutes, that's where Mayo failed, where Dublin brought on the likes of Cormac Costello, the likes of Dermot Conley, the likes of Kevin Bennett to finish off Mayo once and for all. They don't have that now. It's switched over to Mayo, and I just wonder, do Mayo have it in the tank? Do they have the bottle to beat up this Dublin team? Look at the last few championship games, and the thing is about Mayo, though, they only got tested really in that first half against Galway, and their defence was seriously exposed. So that'll be an issue. Like Division 2, they were not tested. Leitrim and Sligo, no disrespect to them, but they weren't tested in them games either. So they didn't learn much. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Will this Mayo bench prove the difference in this game? Or will Dublin gain at that experience? The likes of Dean Rock, Cormac Costello stepping up to play, Kieran Kilkenny, Conor O'Callaghan, who hasn't hit fire the championship either this season. So it should be interesting to see if Dublin hit fire in the semi-final, and if Mayo could really, really put it up to them. I genuinely think Mayo can put it up to Dublin. Can they beat them is another question. It's going to be a very tight game. I suppose you'd have to get closer to the game to get a definitive answer on your prediction of the game. But it should be very interesting to watch this game. I'm really looking forward to the semi-final.
Yeah, absolutely. Same here. I'm hoping to go to it as well once tickets come available, but I'm sure they'll be like gold dust in many ways. Normally Dublin and Mayo games are always like that, whether it's an All-Ireland semi-final or final. And yeah, I've kind of been getting a lot of 2012 vibes kind of off this Dublin and Mayo game, where Dublin had achieved such a big feat in 2011, winning an All-Ireland. It was the last year under Pat Gilroy. Gilroy was probably too, kind of reliant or too loyal maybe to a lot of the older guard in that Dublin team, the likes of your Jer Brennans and whatnot in that team. And you had the likes of your Kieran Kilkennys and Paul Mannions and Jack McCaffrey's coming through, and they weren't really getting game time. I think Kilkenny and McCaffrey played, but they might have come off the bench or something like that. So you might be getting a similar thing here as well with Dublin, where they've, maybe Desi's been too loyal to a lot of those players when you've got the likes of your Kieran Archers and Lee Gannons coming through. So there's a lot of question marks. And even for Dublin, I was even thinking as well, I'm planning on doing an all-star football team of the year later in the week just for the season so far. But I was kind of thinking what Dublin players would even get on there, because it's an interesting one. Maybe Cormac Costello would get in there, Brian Fenton maybe, but compared to previous years, normally you'd have 7 or 8 Dublin players in there, whereas now maybe you have 2 or 3.
It's actually a very good point. Yeah, I definitely put Costello in it. Fenton maybe, but Matthew Rowan and David Bourne, you might argue, have had better seasons. So maybe even 1. That's absolutely astonishing for Dublin in many ways. And even looking at the 2012 championship, they actually went into that Mayo game, strange enough, beating a Leinster team in the quarterfinals by 3 points. And that was Laois. They were kind of on the way down that time. So, and even look, they weren't breezy through Leinster like they usually would either. So, Wexford should have beat them. Meath probably should have beat them if they put up a better performance in the Leinster final. So it has similar vibes in many ways going into this Mayo game, and Mayo weren't expected to turn them over. I can remember vividly, the semi-final before, and Cork lost to Donegal. We were wishing the Donegal fans best of luck against Dublin, fully expecting Dublin would get through, and then Mayo just beat them out of the water. And it has similar vibes, definitely, but I think most people would probably say Mayo would win now rather than 2012, because 2012, that time, they lost along for 2 years beforehand in the All-Ireland qualifiers. It was in a rut that time, Mayo football, and the fact they beat Dublin in the semi-final was a big shock to all concerned in the GAA. So I think it'll be less of a surprise now, given Mayo's talent in the team, given they were All-Ireland finalists last season. They're building something there with James Horan bloating in the young players quickly. And that's where Mayo probably have excelled more than Dublin this year. The older players retired, but only 2 were starters last year, in Clark and Barrett. The rest of them were all blooded in last year, and it seems to be, a positive for Mayo that these players are blooded in. The likes of Owen McLaughlin, the likes of Tommy Conroy, Matthew Rowan is still in his mid-20s, I think. So there's some young, talented players in that Mayo team, and now they have a strong bench. And maybe that work last year, blooding in them young players early, could prove dividends for Mayo going to the semi-final, and maybe Desi going towards the older players rather than the likes of Kieran Archer or Paddy O'Cuffey-Byrne or Lee Gannon. Maybe that will take its toll on this Dublin team, and Mayo could win this game. But the more we talk about Mayo winning the game, you'd have to see a reaction from Dublin. They could just blitz Mayo now in the semi-final, just wait and see. It should be very interesting, but maybe blooding in them young players early was a positive for Mayo last year, gained that All-Ireland final experience. And they could really, really challenge Dublin in the All-Ireland semi-final. It should be a cracker of a game.
Yeah, I suppose the main question for Mayo definitely is their defence, because we even seen in the Clare game, Robert Henley a couple of times, just a little bit vulnerable under a high ball. We've seen that before with Dublin in the past, and that could be a target. Maybe they just float long balls into Con O'Callaghan or Dean Rock and try cause a couple of problems there. So it will be an interesting game, I suppose, once it comes around. Just looking at a bit of a power rankings, I suppose, of the top 4 kind of left in the championship right now. You've obviously got Dublin, Kerry, Mayo, and Tyrone. What order would you have them in? Would you still have Dublin as number 1, Kerry as number 2? For myself personally, I'd still have Dublin as number 1 until they potentially get beat. But you could certainly argue the case that Kerry are potentially maybe number 1 right now. They are the informed team and probably the favourites, and duly so.
It really hurts me to say this, Aaron, but Kerry are number 1. They're hitting the lights out in all the championship games so far, all the league games, and they put away Clare, Tipperary and Cork with consummate ease. And Clare Tipperary didn't play that badly, and Kerry still blitzed them. Cork was a different story. I thought our players just lay down to the challenge, and Kerry will get a bigger challenge in the semi-final against Tyrone. Number 2, I'd probably put Dublin. Look, I think it's really coming to an end. You see the performances like Kildare played poorly and still got close to Dublin. That just shows you how far Dublin have fallen over the last few years. And I think this was the closest Leinster final since 2013 or was it 2017 against Kildare? I'm actually not sure. 2013 was 7 points against Meath. Yesterday was 8 points. So that tells you all you need to know about this Dublin team. I think it's kind of coming to an end. We'll have to see in the semi-final now. Number 3, I'd probably put Mayo above Tyrone, just because I think Mayo are more consistent than Tyrone. Tyrone, you don't know what performance they're going to put up, no matter what players they have. They could put in a very bad one against Kerry, or a decent enough one against Monaghan, or a superb one in the second half against Donegal. You don't know what Tyrone team is going to turn up. It's a strange one at Mayo, as I said. They haven't really got tested other than the Galway first half. And that's the strange aspect for this Mayo team. Like, no disrespect to Leitrim, but Sligo, they didn't get tested there. Division 2 is at the level that Mayo fans want them to be at. So it will be an interesting one. But if you're asking me about my power rankings, I'd put Kerry as number 1, Dublin number 2, Mayo number 3, and Tyrone number 4. But these semi-finals should be very interesting, and more interesting than previous years gone by.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it definitely is going to be an interesting one, all right. Like, and even looking at some of the kind of the top 3 footballers in the championship so far, kind of just having a little discussion on that. Like, you've obviously got Paddy Clifford in there, probably Darren McCurry, Sean O'Shea, Matty Donnelly. Like, who would be your top 3, or is there any 3 players that kind of jump out at you when you think of the top 3 footballers so far in this year's championship?
Definitely Paddy Clifford. I think he's the link in that Kerry team. He might not score as much as Sean O'Shea or his brother David, but she's on the ball, just running up and down the field, playing the ball in, having the presence of mind to know when to kick a score, when to not, to play the ball into the likes of Shawnee and the likes of David Clifford. It's just remarkable. And it's remarkable the fact he's only got noticed now, really, as a Kerry player. He didn't start against Cork in that Mark Keane show last year. He probably should have started, in all honesty, but he'd probably be my number 1 by far in this year's championship so far. If I'm going next to, Darren McCurry definitely is up there for Tyrone. He scored 22 points so far in the championship. I think 10 of those or 12 of those, something like that, is from play, which is absolutely incredible. He's an incredible athlete, and most people will probably put Colin McShane, Conor McKenna, Derek Canavan above the likes of, or Matty Donnelly as well, above Darren McCurry before the year even started. And it's remarkable he's picking up the form rather than those players, and those players will be driven on by his performance going to the semi-final against Kerry. And if I'm looking for a third, it's probably a tough one. Is this a bit left field? I think Shawnee O'Shea has been excellent in this championship. David Moore in midfield for Kerry, Gavin White, Tom O'Sullivan, loads of them Kerry players, Matty Donnelly. But to be fair, I'd probably go for a Mayo player, and I'm going to go Matty Rowan. I think he's been absolutely outstanding for Mayo throughout the year of the championship. And when Aidan O'Shea even isn't playing to his full potential in certain games, this guy is stepping up now. And it's a scary thought for Dublin. Brian Fenton now has a midfield rival in form. And you even see he turned that game against Galway almost on his own, really. And that's a remarkable sign of a player. And he's been absolutely superb this year. And he's kicked on from his decent performances last year. He could have got an All-Star actually last year, but he didn't in the end. Like James McCarthy and Brian Fenton got the plaudits at the end, but he definitely could have got one, and he's going to get one this year, no doubt about that, because he's absolutely performing to his level best. So to answer your question, the 3, I'd probably go with Paddy Clifford, Darren McCurry, and Matty Rowan.
Absolutely, yeah. Like Matthew Rowan's a very good shout as well. I didn't consider him in my top 3, but definitely up there without a doubt. Like, and probably been the best midfielder so far this year in the championship. You'd have to say, probably between himself and David Moore maybe as well. Like, and yeah, like it is going to be interesting definitely to see how that pans out, because even looking at that top 3, like it's probably not a top 3 that many people had expected at the start of the year. I think a lot of people were looking at, your David Cliffords, your Con O'Callaghan, Brian Fenton, and some people even had Cluxton, who obviously isn't going to be playing this year. So it is kind of mad to think how it is and how it has kind of shaped out. Just running through the two under-20 games briefly, it was Monaghan 114, Down 315, and Cork 14 points, Offaly 310. I suppose first of all, like Offaly, Down, and Roscommon, they're the three teams left in the under-20 football championship. And funnily enough, like 1988 was the most recent time that either one of these three sides won an under-20 All-Ireland, and that was Offaly. Like, you'd have to go back to 1979 for Down, 78 for Roscommon. So, like, kind of mad that those three are the three remaining counties. And maybe it shows that there might be, maybe Offaly and Down might be two up-and-coming teams and might maybe challenge, the big boys in a couple of years.
It does, yeah. It's actually a very entertaining under-20 championship. And yeah, even the Connacht final between Roscommon and Mayo, I've watched actually a few of them games, and they've been absolutely brilliant games to watch. Even Cork and Kerry in the semi-final. Down Monaghan was tremendous excitement towards the end. And even you say neither of these teams have won since 1988. Maybe that's a sign that Mayo win Sam finally. I don't know, maybe it is.
Maybe. I think they always tend to kind of find a sign for something anyway, so maybe.
Maybe it's the same as football's coming home, and obviously it didn't know this year. So we'll have to see. But look at them three teams. They've been a breath of fresh air in the championship. Like Down, I suppose most people would have wanted Monaghan to win the game because, for obvious reasons, condolences to the Duffy family. But Down had to play the game to their best as well, and they did. They played absolutely outstanding. Conor Laverty and Sean Boylan, they're the backroom team. Like, it's superb men to get in, and I have to say as well, Rory O'Hagan, I think the number 15 for Down, his interview after the game was just spine-tingling stuff. It was absolutely emotional, and condolences to him and losing his friend last year, and he was saying how the Monaghan boys feel, and yeah, it was a brilliant interview after the game. But the way Down played in that game, it was absolutely superb. And Conor Laverty and Sean Boylan seemed to be getting the best out of that team. Roscommon with James Fitzpatrick in centre forward looks a very good player. So it should be very interesting to see who wins. You look at the Offaly Cork game. Look, I think from a Cork point of view, I think we had 4 clear signs before the first goal went in that this Offaly team aren't going to lie down. And they certainly didn't. Jack Bryant is a superb player, Cormac Egan, and they showed beating Dublin was no fluke whatsoever. And they're here to win this All-Ireland. Shane Lowry's now pumping money in for their youth development, and I think that'll only be good for Offaly GAA. John Mahon's in charge of the senior team. And you look at their hurlers as well, they won the Christie Reid Cup. So everything's looking rosy in the garden for Offaly GAA. But I don't want to be making excuses now as a Cork man, but we did play absolutely brilliantly. We got back into the game. We didn't lie down in many ways like the seniors. We came back into the game until Offaly finished us off with a goal at the end. But what I will say, we were missing Conor Corbett, probably a David Clifford type player for us. He did his ACL. Unfortunately, I hope he recovers soon because he's a bright young player for us. Brian Hayes and Jack Callan are two main players for us as well. Went off playing hurling on Wednesday night against Limerick, so maybe they could have been tired of hurling and football over the last few weeks. Evan Cook, another midfielder, was missing for us. O'Hanlon, that full forward, he was minor last year, came on against Kerry, kicked a point. He was injured after that game. So Jack Lawton, another player from that minor campaign in 2019, he was actually, from reports, he was actually going to be called up for the senior panel. So he's definitely a midfielder for the future. And to miss them kind of players, not just one in Corbett, but the likes of Lawton, the likes of Cook, Hayes and Callan playing week in, week out, maybe it took a toll of these Cork players. We will be back next year. I think the minor talent is coming through. You see it, well, I seen it against Kerry on Friday night. We blitzed them for most parts of that game, and we won the game. It was more comprehensive than a point, and we won the game in the end. And it's the first time since 2013 we beat Kerry in under 20 in Boyner. So things are looking up for Cork football. But as for the three counties, Offaly are here to win it. Roscommon Down should be very interesting on Saturday night. We'll see what Down come up with on Saturday night. She looked at Roscommon. They've had a 2-week gap. Maybe they'll have more time to mull over the game. Like Down have a quick turnaround, but I know the winning adrenaline can keep you going. So it should be very interesting. But it looks. I know. I might seem a bit biased here, but I hope Offaly win it. Like, they beat Dublin, they beat Cork. They deserve it. They absolutely deserve it. And Cormac Egan and Jack Bryan, I'd be saying for John Monaghan, bring him into the senior team next year, because I don't know, can they chance for Leinster and all honesty? I think Dublin and Kildare, even Meath, are too strong, but bring him in and see what happens next year. You could go on a good run, maybe even to the Super 8s if it's still there. So, look, future's bright for Offaly football. I hope they win it in the end, seeing as they beat probably the two best teams they could have come across in Cork and Dublin. So they definitely deserve it. And long live Offaly football. And this under-20 championship's very, very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like what you were saying there, like with Offaly, I mean, to go and win the Leinster Championship. Like, funnily enough, actually, the last time Offaly won the Leinster Championship under 20 level in 95, they actually went on to win it 2 years later at senior level in 97, and they actually beat Dublin en route to winning that. And that was at a time when Meath were looking really good. Kildare got to an All-Ireland final a year later. Like, so it was probably arguably almost a bigger achievement than what it would be now, although Dublin probably weren't as good back then. So, like what you said, with Offaly, like beating Cork, beating the Dubs. I mean, personally, I felt that Cork were going to go on and win the under-20 All-Ireland because they won it 2 years previous. I know their team has changed a little bit since then, but they do seem to be kind of doing very well at minor level. They obviously had that minor level success 2 years ago as well. So, like, beating the Dubs, beating Cork, Jack Bryant looks very, very impressive as well. You've got Cormac Egan, and obviously in the senior team already, like Cian Farrell's looked unbelievable this year. So, like, for Offaly, like, considering the gap between like all the counties in Leinster, like excluding Dublin, probably isn't that big. I mean, who knows for Offaly in the next 2 or 3 years, like getting to a Leinster final, if they avoid Dublin, like on their route to a Leinster final, I suppose it's not impossible.
It's not, no. And look, even you look at 95 when they won it. I know you said Dublin weren't that strong. Dublin were on the back of an All-Ireland win. So they must have been strong, in all honesty. Like the likes of Jason Sherlock in that team. So, and Kieran Whelan coming into it, I believe, as well. So, look, it was a brilliant achievement for Offaly to win in 97. Could they do it 2 years down the line? I think a lot has changed since then. I don't think they'll win it as quickly as 2 years. They could win it 4 years' time. You even look at the seniors. Keith Johnson's another player. He was out injured this year and has to come back. He's a brilliant player there. Even the older players, Niall McNamee, I don't know, will he stick around for this success? I think most people say he's a fool to retire if he retires now with the young players coming through. And it's the best chance of his success in his Offaly career. And he definitely deserves it after the years he's put into the faithful county. So it should be very interesting to see how Offaly progress in the next few years. And if they keep John Monaghan as their senior manager and bring up them young lads like their defenders, like Egan, like Brynett, who knows what can happen. They can go on a run, maybe even to the Super 8s or the last round of the qualifiers next year. We'll have to see. But for now, things are looking very, very well for Offaly football at the moment, and for Offaly Hurl. Offaly GAA in general, it's absolutely brilliant to see, because we need that historic county back at the top table, competing for All-Ireland sooner rather than later in both codes, not just one.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like a lot of people always kind of have a bit of a soft spot for Offaly down the years because of, obviously the way they won All Irelands and hurling, and obviously stopping Kerry's 5 in a row that time back in the 1980s, I think lives long in the memory for probably a lot of Dublin and Cork fans as well. Thank you very much for watching and listening to another episode of the GAA Fan TV podcast. This was myself and Matthew Hurley from the GAA Statsman Podcast. Do hope you all very much enjoy. Do leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. The hurling review show will be out tomorrow. We discuss all the weekend's big action from the All Ireland Senior Hurling Championship, including Waterford's demolition of Tipperary, a 7-point victory for Waterford over Tip. We also discuss Cork's win over the Dubs, and also how both Cork and Waterford will get on in their respective All-Ireland Senior Hurling Championship semi-finals. Waterford are playing Limerick, Cork are playing Kilkenny. Two very interesting games, and definitely two games worth keeping an eye on this weekend. We also run through our top 3 hurlers in the All-Ireland Senior Hurling Championship so far this year, the power rankings of the top 4 teams left currently in the country, and also discuss some of the lower tier hurling games, including Offaly's big win over Derry and what it could mean for Offaly hurling moving forward. Do stay tuned for that, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one.